this is a hot topic right now. So for anybody who has a teenager, you may have seen that teenagers are binge watching a Netflix series called 13 Reasons Why. And it's kind of like the equivalent of fidget spinners. It's something that, came on the scene and it's a huge boom, and same thing happened with 13 Reasons Why. So it's based off of a book for adults, young adults of the same name. And I'll give you a tiny bit of just a description of what the series is about. So it's a girl named Hannah Baker. She's a 17-year-old teenager. She goes to high school, and she creates 13 tapes, and she hands them out prior to committing suicide. And then she commits suicide. And the reason she does that is that she identifies these 13 people as reasons for her committing suicide. So as you can understand, it would be quite graphic, and it brings up some heavy topics, including, as I mentioned on Tuesday, slut shaming, suicide, sexual assault, and bullying. So there's lots of heavy topics. And so yeah, there's been a lot of teenagers who've been watching it, and there's some places in the States that have been noticing an increased rate of suicide as a result. And in Canada as well, many countries have put out warnings to parents and through the school system. So that's why I wanted to discuss that. And I'm going to have a little bit of a section for teachers and then a section for parents, just to go over some of the topic. And why there's a concern for me as a helping professional about 13 Reasons Why is threefold. The first is that viewers who are impressionable may romanticize suicide. Second, it desensitizes viewers to rape, violence, and suicide. And also, many of the adults and even professionals within the series are not depicted as being helpful. So there's no trust or help associated with adults, teachers, counselors, or parents. And this may give kids viewing the show the same impression, and that it might be true for their life in general, which for most cases that just isn't true. So my hope is that we can present an alternative view to the youth that live with us. So that alternative view is that there are consequences to our choices, and suicide is not the answer to our problems. And second, that help is available. So why discuss this series now? I guess the reason being is that it's hugely popular. Many teenagers I know have or are watching it. Also, they're coming out with a sequel. There's a planned sequel. And additionally, there's regular media coverage for, of suicides of famous actors, actresses, athletes, musicians. And plus, there's so many times where people on Facebook are posting suicide prevention posts, which I think is great. But it got me to thinking, do we know how to help those closest to us? Can we do something more? It felt a little bit like a call to action for me, and I think this is a forum we can use to open up a discussion. So when I was doing some research, it showed that when youth with mental health conditions were asked to list reasons why they thought about or attempted suicide, one that came up a lot was an exposure to the suicide of another, or even exposure to graphic or sensationalized depictions of death. So I'm not sure if you've heard of suicide contagion, but it is unfortunately common that when a suicide occurs, that it makes those around them that are already thinking about suicide more likely to attempt it. And so to me, this makes 13 Reasons Why a risk factor for some youth in our lives. I'm not saying that watching 13 Reasons Why is going to cause somebody to attempt or contemplate or attempt suicide. Actually, one of the things that 13 Reasons Why does a really good job of discussing is that there are many causes to suicide, but 13 Reasons Why may pose a risk for those youth that are isolated, vulnerable, struggling, or who are easily influenced by suggestive material. So here's kind of the how-to part. And this isn't going to be extensive or in-depth. I just want to cover a few points so that, maybe start a discussion, and let's dive in. So what can educators do to help? Well, number one, many of the situations that were depicted in the series, they do occur in high school situations. There is bullying, there is drinking and driving, there is slut shaming, there are many things that happen in 13 Reasons Why that do happen in our school systems and in our community at large. So when kids want to talk about them, listen. And number two is then take them seriously. Don't minimize what they have to say. If they're being brave enough to talk about it with you, give them the space and the time to listen seriously to what their concerns are. Number three is just never promising to keep a sign a secret. So if you see a warning sign, even if you think it's going to build trust by keeping that secret, it's better not to make that promise. Number four is learning the warning signs. So this is good for everybody. And the warning signs are the same for youth as they are for adults. And so if you don't know them, I'll teach you a few of them, and if you do know them, this is just a really good review. So the first is emotional distress. If you see a youth in your life that is showing emotional distress, that can be a warning sign for suicide. Number two, and I think this one's probably pretty obvious, is the giving away of possessions. So that's giving away things that they find really important to others, family members, something that you wouldn't expect for them to give away at random. And then you have changes in a person's behavior, their hygiene, their appearance, their thoughts, and their feelings. And something to point out that many people don't know is that the feelings don't always have to go from happy to sad. That, I think, is a little bit more common, and people expect that, but actually it can also be a sign if kids go from being really sad to happy. And there's reasons for that I can talk about it in depth at another time, but so do keep that in mind. And then preoccupation with death. So if there's a youth that you know who seems really preoccupied with death, that can be a warning sign. And finally, the last one I'm going to discuss, even though there are others, just for the sake of time, is suicidal threats. So these can be direct, and that might be saying something like, I'm going to kill myself, or they can be indirect, saying something like, I need this all to stop. And the one thing that teachers do have that others may not be able to see is that they have access to students drawing, students writing, and also to what they say. So those threats can come in many different forms, including that, and also the preoccupation with death. We can also keep an eye out on social media posts, because there are many times that students will post things online. So this one's a little more difficult, and that is asking them straight out. So if you see some signs, or if somebody's coming to you, asking them straight out, are you planning on committing suicide, is an important thing for teachers, even counselors, other people who are involved with children. And that seems difficult, but it is important. And lastly, if any of those things happen and you're able to, provide help. Stay with that youth. Don't leave them. Make sure that they get the help that they need. So as we transition into how parents can help, I wanted to point something out. I'm sure there are some of you who are feeling super uncomfortable about discussing this. I'm also sure there are people who are thinking about talking about suicide as a bad thing. And I'm not advocating for teachers to walk into science class and say, okay, students, it's time to talk about suicide. What I am advocating for is that if it comes up in discussion or if you see signs that are concerning, that you take it seriously and don't minimize it. I'd also like to point out that it is a falsehood that speaking about suicide with someone who isn't thinking about it will give them the idea to commit suicide. That is a myth, and actually one of the reasons the topic of mental health and suicide has been so hush-hush. So, hey, if you're just joining in, we're just, I'm Michelle and I'm with Stride Wellness, and we're just having a discussion here about 13 reasons why and some suicide prevention. And we just finished discussing some of the teacher topics and are now moving to the parent portion of it. So what can parents do? So you can ask your children, have you seen the series? And if they have, discuss it with them. If they're in the middle of the series, you could possibly suggest asking them to put it on pause so that you can watch it and catch up to them. Or you could even ask if you could watch where they're at. You could watch that with the remainder of it with them. For some of you, you may get into it and realize that it's not age appropriate for your child. And if it's not, that's a decision that you're going to make as a family. Initially, Netflix did not put the proper ratings on when they published it, and they also didn't put on the warning cards. Those have all been done. And I think a lot of kids got to watching it and didn't realize the intensity or that it was probably not age appropriate for them. And Netflix has come out with kind of like a warning system, but they've also come out with a link for people all over the world to be able to look at suicide prevention information. And I'm going to include that in the comments at the end. So number 2 for parents, as for teachers, is to learn the warning signs. And if they come up, talk about them with your youth. Your children may not display them, but their friends might. And so that leads into number 3, which is talk about the warning signs with your children and about in regards to them or with their friends. Fourthly, don't judge. Set out time where you can devote your full concentration so you can hear what they are saying. Some of what the show may bring up might result in deep or intense conversation, and just make sure that you have the time and the space to talk about it with them in depth, that's free of distraction. And fifthly, talk about how help can be obtained, whether that's with a family member, a trusted friend, or another trusted adult. That might be a teacher, administrator, school counselor, a coach, or even a religious leader. If they know that help is available to them without repercussion, they're more likely to come to you or to that person if they feel they have concerns about or thoughts about suicide, or if a friend does as well. And what do you do if there is a warning sign or a risk? Stay calm, don't judge, and listen. Remember that with suicide ideation and attempt is unbearable emotional pain leading to these thoughts. So avoid minimizing it. Statements like, get over it, don't help. And finally, stay with them and get help. So I know we're nearing the 15-minute mark, and I wanted to keep it at there. So if you have any questions, I'm going to invite you over to my website to carry on this conversation. We can delve into it a little bit more in depth. So you can visit www.stridewellness.org and go to a forum that I have set up there. You'll find a section specifically for those who have watched this Facebook Live. It will be a great place for asking questions, sharing concerns, or providing your opinion. And again, share this with friends and family or other people that you think might be interested, and they can come over to the forum as well. In addition, I'm going to supply some helpline information in the comment section, as well as the link that I mentioned that's coming from Netflix. So I just want to say thank you for joining me again, and I hope you have an awesome day. Take care. Bye.